despite all of the polling, because of redistricting, et cetera, you believe that we actually have a good chance of Republicans holding the House.
It's better. So the stats since 34, that's the first midterm of the New Deal coalition,
Okay.
1934, FDR's first midterm. The president's party loses seats in 20 out of 23 midterms. The exceptions to that were FDR in 1934, and then you had Clinton in 98, and you had Bush in '02. Bush, of course, had the 9/11 effect, helping him from with a bit of a tailwind. 98, which was interesting, is the public actually grew tired of people going after the Clinton scandals, personal scandals. Then you had 34, where FDR's successes with the New Deal and putting in all the programs were stuff that people wanted to see continue. So that's a 1 in 8 chance on the inverse of the president's party gaining seats. But I think that Trump has a better than 1 in 8 chance to hold the House. I would say today the Dems are 2 out of 3 likely to flip the House, but probably narrowly. But we don't know what Florida's going to do. Indiana really screwed us. That was just, we're 10 years into the Trump era, and we just found out last week that we needed to replace every senator in the Indiana chamber, which is unbelievable to me. They had more senators vote against the map than for, and I think this is probably the Pence effect, just like you have a lot of Bushies stuck in Texas. So that's a real shame that Republicans. I don't think on face value it's good that we're redistricting to win elections, but if they're doing it, we better do it too. So DeSantis needs to dig deep, come up with about 5 Republican seats in Florida. Maybe if the Republicans can sharpen their legal pencils a bit, maybe we can get an overturn in California or Virginia based on them going around their independent redistricting commissions.
All right. One of my other follow-up questions, and again, I will now officially refer to you as the first gentleman of Arizona's 17th district. When your wife's bill comes up, what kind of support does she get for what I would assume is some pretty common sense voting integrity measures? So do any Democrats actually agree with her?
So there's a few Democrats that she knows personally that could arguably become Republicans in the future. Now they're going to run up against the ideological purity side of the Republican Party because they're still part Democrat, obviously. But usually that revolves around social issues. I'm not going to out any of them here, but there's a lot of sidebar conversations that go on complaining about how crazy the progressive factions in an otherwise conservative state get. But the Republican factions in Arizona, they disagree about a lot of stuff. There's a lot of folks within the party that are like your standard Republicans everywhere else who can be swayed and bought. But as far as elections go, there's a lot of election-related trauma in Arizona from the last several cycles, where most people are sick of being the butt of all jokes when it comes to running elections. So I think that an aggressive elections bill will get through. There's been some arguing about the address verification between people, which is essential. It does us no good to count ballots fast like Florida if they're counterfeit ballots from bad addresses. So really the answer is trimming down mail-in ballots to where legitimately disabled and deployed military are the only people doing it, but that's not going to happen in the next 12 months.
All right, guys, fall's upon us. That means if you want to have a luxurious night's sleep, do what I do. Switch your sheets over to Boll Branch. It's like staying in the nicest hotel you've ever stayed in your life. I feel like I close my eyes and I'm like, am I in the really nice hotel I stayed in once? But you can do that at home every night. Here's the kicker. To get Boll Branch sheets, you have to use my URL, Boll and Branch, BOLLAND branch.com/Spicer. You got to use it exactly like that. BollandBranch.com/Spicer for 25% off and unlock free shipping on your first order. Some exclusions apply. The other thing that I thought was interesting that you noted is when these people are moving from California to states like Arizona, Idaho, you mentioned, so these are people who are saying, at least it sounds like, this is what I want you to follow up on, that they are like, I don't want to live in the blue world of California, the Gavin Newsom California. I'm going to move somewhere that's more in keeping with my values. So like an Idaho, maybe a Texas, a Wyoming, Montana, the Dakotas, Florida. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
It is. And I've actually got that article up. So it's called "It's Time to Stop Regurgitating Nonsense About Blue State Transplants and Get to Work." Because you hear it all the time from people in Texas. Well, they're going to move in and turn Texas blue. No, they're not. Actually, when people move into populated areas like that, they turn the center a little bit left that already exists there. because they're going to become a more urbanized electorate. But the people that are moving in, not only are they top of the ticket Republicans, they're so fed up with Democrat politics, they're going to float the entire ticket down ballot Republican. So I'm looking at these stats I posted here. So the Idaho Secretary of State is the only one I know of that will show you registration stats of transplants to the state. So here's San Francisco, California. 255 voters moved from San Francisco, not the metro, but the heart of San Fran. So San Fran is 88-10 kind of Democrat turf. All right.
Say that again. Is what is 8? Say that part again.
San Francisco goes about 88-10 Democrat in your standard presidential election. All right.
It's like Washington, D.C.
Right, but the partisan registration of San Francisco residents moving to Idaho is only D plus 12, 44-32. All right, so then we move down the road to LA, Los Angeles. It is 48-30 Republicans, so R plus 18 from Los Angeles, California. All right, then we can go to Seattle, R plus 13 to Idaho. We go to Portland, Oregon, R plus 22 to Idaho. So this is the heart of Seattle, the heart of Portland. So when we get out into the red turf of California and Oregon, you're looking at R plus 40s, R plus 50s that are moving to Idaho. Now, Idaho is Trump plus 36 or something like that. But it's pretty clear that people that are leaving the big blue areas are not moving somewhere just to turn them blue. And that's why you get Arizona moving from R plus 166,000 4 years ago to R plus 328 now. Same thing going on with Florida. These New Yorkers and New Jersey residents moving down to Florida are turning it redder. People moving to North Carolina. North Carolina is going to flip Republican by the end of the year. So everywhere in the chart I sent you with all 30 states, 28 of the 30 states are redder than they were in 2024. And the two that are bluer, one of them's a technicality with New York's mayoral primary, shifting that to the left. And then Utah, of course, being R plus 39 with a lot of voter roll maintenance, has moved that temporarily to the left as well.
So let's start with Arizona, and then I got to get to North Carolina. In Arizona, do you believe that by 2028, it's a lock for the Republicans? We're not going to be calling it a battleground state anymore, that whether it's J.D. Vance or whomever, that they will count on Arizona as solidly in the Republican column?
Look, so if Biggs gets in there and the Florida-style election bill with address verification and speedy counting of ballots happens, then the Republican nominee in 2028 will probably win by more than 10 points. If we have, the same rules we have now, I think you're still looking at R plus 7 or so. So Arizona is re-embracing its Republican roots. It's continuing to move, and all 15 counties are redder than they were in November of 2024, including Maricopa County, where Recorder Justin Heap just removed over 140,000 registrations a month ago. So they're getting out some of that deadfall with the independent registrations that are all receiving mail-in ballots. If you clamp down on that, you clamp down on the ballot collection game quite a bit. And then you have an undercurrent of the minority vote here in Arizona, which is you get the Latino working class, which is prevalent in parts of Maricopa County, all throughout Pima County, some of the more rural counties. And then you have a fairly large native population that Trump shifted pretty well in 2024. So you start tightening up those minority demographic voting trends and continue to get the +1 Republican transplants from everywhere, you're going to turn the state into Florida.
Okay. North Carolina piqued my interest when you were talking about it because Michael Whatley, the former RNC chairman, is running for the Senate there against Roy Cooper, very popular former governor. That's a Republican hold. So Tom Tillis is a Republican retiring. So this is a seat we need to hold for the majority in the Senate. If you're Michael Whatley, based on the data that you just shared, Seth, are you excited or do you want more time? Like, in other words, the shift that you're talking about in North Carolina, can it happen before the midterms, or are we going to need all the way to 2028?
Well, the saving grace on North Carolina, it will still play ball with Democrat politics down ticket. So it still has a D plus registration, just barely. It's about to flip. We're talking less than 1,000 advantage for Democrats as of this week's update. So you're going to have an R plus state on the total roll. It's already there on the active roll. But you have about 96 counties out of 100 shifted Republican from 2020 to 2024. The GOP needs to get serious about Wake County and Mecklenburg County and stop losing them by a ton and shorten that a bit. Whatley is, the Republican Party does better in federal races in North Carolina. Voters there will go Republican president, they'll go Republican U.S. Senate. And I don't think they've had a Democrat senator for a while. But they're going to, Whatley's going to have to get out there. It's not a big loss with Tillis. He didn't win any of his 2 races by more than 2 points. So you can look at it one way where he's the incumbent and he barely won, and that's danger, or maybe he just underperformed a lot. Whatley's got Trump's endorsement. He's sort of mixed as far as how people on the grassroots perceive him, but I think once push comes to shove, they're going to choose him over Roy Cooper. But Cooper is the former governor. It's going to be a 26 midterm. So if Trump's economy booms, and you have all those tides going in, like a baseball team peaking at the right time, then I think that Whatley would win the race. I think it's going to be a close one. And I also think that the North Carolina Senate race is the most likely Republican loss in the Senate.
You think that over Maine, over Ohio? Why?
But Maine is going to go to Collins. She's already won that seat 6 times. So she ran like 30 points to the right of where Obama was in 2008 when Obama won the state by 20 points. So Collins, she gets enough improvement in the Southern District of Maine that she's going to be able to ride out the Northern District to win that. She's got a proven track record of that. I used to be one of those folks that thought you should get a real MAGA candidate up there, but after 3 elections of watching Maine has the worst elections in New England, by the way. Ranked choice voting. They have a lot of mail-in voting. They got a lot of population density there in the South, which is pretty much the exurbs of Boston. She's the best you're going to get up there. She's also, if she doesn't run against Janet Mills, who's the incumbent governor of Maine, then she's going to run against a guy named Graham Plattner, who's got a pretty interesting record. And I think that he will really struggle with those more affluent, I guess you call them massholes that have moved into the southern portion of Maine. So I think that she'll win. I think that Whatley is got some in jeopardy there in North Carolina. But I also am not very bullish about Republican flips in the Senate.
Well, that would be a hold, right? So but I'm with you. I mean, Whatley doesn't have necessarily the name ID. He was the state chairman. What concerns you? Just that the base won't turn out?
It's just a Republican president's midterm. That's all.
Yeah.
There were certain races in 2018 where Trump did fine on them. That's where, North Carolina may not turn out to be an issue at all. The Republicans expanded the Senate in 2018, which was only been done a couple times, but lost the House. I think that the 2018 midterms had a lot of the new age of election laws in effect that we didn't know about until the 2020 election. But Ted Cruz had a tight race in Texas, so it's going to depend on how much people remember Roy Cooper as governor, what they thought of his governorship. But right now, I've seen polls with Whatley 5 points on the most optimistic down. I've seen him 8 points. I don't believe those. I think that Cooper, if he wins the state, I think his ceiling is probably no more than about 2 points. I think Whatley's got a ceiling in North Carolina of 3 or 4.
So at the beginning, I don't know, several months back when you came here, you were talking about, I think it might even be the summertime, all these states that have registration by party were moving in the right direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What happened, right? We lost Virginia. We lost New Jersey. The Tennessee special election, to me, I don't get the denial that some people are in that special election just outside or around surrounding Nashville. And here's why. Trump won it by 22. I think Marsha Blackburn won it by 22 or 21. Bill Lee, the governor, won it by about the same. Yes, it's been a little closer and whatever. But here's my point. You had Afton Bain, the Democrat candidate, literally on record, like a video and audio clip of her saying, I hate Nashville. I hate country music. She had a whole defund the police thing. We should have crushed that. That's like a candidate that you dream of. And yet it was 9 points.
Yeah, well, I don't like Nashville either. So,
oh, come on.
And
But you also, well, first of all, let's put that aside. I do like Nashville, but I will say that you're not running to represent it. And if you are running opposition research and a candidate says, I hate the biggest city in the district I want to represent, I hate cops, I hate country music, I would assume that doesn't go over too well with a lot of voters.
Well, the thing that amazes me is that she would hate Nashville because Nashville, forget just the rest of Davidson County. The core of Nashville is probably 85-15 Democrat utopia. So if she hates that, then imagine what she thinks about, some of the rest of these counties, like Dixon County. Now, but here's the deal. So Van Epps' win was great. People need to understand the special election, midterm, and off-year election dynamics, starting with a set of realistic expectations. Now, let me tell you a personal story. If I sit up a little bit, you'll see that I've got my Ole Miss polo shirt on. Ole Miss is advancing to the next round of the playoffs against Georgia. Special shout out to Brigadier General Blaine Holt, who's a Newsmax contributor, and a Georgia Bulldog alum who gave me a lot of crap when Georgia beat Ole Miss earlier this year. Their only loss. So, it's going to be a tight game. But Ole Miss, before they were good at football, we played Vanderbilt every year, and Vanderbilt up until recently was terrible. They were if they got into a bowl at 6-6, people were happy. But Vanderbilt circled their calendar every year when they were going to play Ole Miss, and Vanderbilt played the Super Bowl when it was Ole Miss. I mean, I'm talking about good teams. They were playing down to the wire. Sometimes they would upset. And it was everything we could do to just get through that game and win by a field goal. So special elections have the same dynamic. So if you're in a district, which Tennessee 7, Trump won it by over 21 points, and he ran a half a point ahead of Mark Green. So it was about even there. So you don't have much of a drop off. But you got Republican plus 21 margins are common there. Van Epps won by 9. Well, what's happening here is you have the other side that is out of power, locked out, completely out of power, is angry, right? And they are definitely going to vote to stick it to Trump. Orange man is bad, right? And then you have the Republican Party, which is overwhelmingly rural outside of Nashville. You're talking huge margins. They don't come out in as big a numbers because Donald Trump isn't on the ticket. It's not a presidential election. There's not as much engagement. There's not as much party contact. So you're going to run that to the left no matter what. And the Democrats have also in other states got ballot collection apparatuses, which don't work as well in Tennessee because there's such good control over mail-in ballots. So had that race been in a state like Pennsylvania, then you might have had a different outcome. But Van Epps plus 9 in a sleepy Christmas season special election is a good result. Now, the Virginia results are not. They were predictable, but you look at the stats in Virginia. Since 1977, 12 out of 13 governor's races in Virginia have been won by the party not in the White House. 12 out of 13. So anybody should have been able to look at that and said, look, this is not going to be a Republican seat. Glenn Youngkin only won by 2 points. This state is a lot bluer than it was in 1977, 1987, 97. So Spanberger was an obvious win to me, especially running the whole spook angle, being, part of the, law enforcement community from Northern Virginia. And Winsome Earl Sears, of course, was looking at a more urbanized electorate, as a super conservative electorate, not really. And plus, Trump is cutting federal jobs. They just ran an article last week about hundreds of thousands of federal jobs are gone. So it's great to laugh at the people at the Department of State walking out with their brown cardboard box, but that person sets their brown cardboard box down on their desk in Loudoun County, Virginia, or in Alexandria, Virginia, is definitely going to come out and vote to stick it to the orange man in November. So Spanberger was obvious at the top. Most people had her 8 to 9 points. She wound up almost 15. Then you had the lieutenant governor candidate, who was born in India, who followed her by a couple points. And then you had the big one was the attorney general's race, which I thought that Maieres would have that. But what's going on now is Virginia now has no excuse mail-in balloting. And you look at the splits on that, is Maieres won the election day vote. Jay Jones narrowly won the early vote, but Jones won the mail vote by 47 points. So you have to square it in your mind somewhere that there's this group of people that vote exclusively by mail, and they do it by plus 47 margins. So instead of having backfilled mail-in ballots and trucks pulling up to count centers and blocking off windows with cardboard boxes, that's a really bad look. That was what we had in 2020, and everybody lost their minds, and 5 out of 8 Americans don't trust the results of that election. So it's a lot easier to front load that over 6 weeks of early voting that goes all the way back into September, and then you dump the ballots, but sometimes you wind up with crazy margins like Spanberger plus 15, when most people thought that would be 7-8 points. And you got the same thing in New Jersey, where I'm not a huge polling guy, but most people thought Cheryl would win by 3 to 6 points. I figure she'd be right around 5 based on Chitterelli's performance in 2021. She wound up winning by 13 points, and Chitterelli had way more votes than Phil Murphy won with 4 years ago. So ballot collection over time, early voting period, is going to carry the day in states who have laws configured to produce those types of outcomes. The big damage in Virginia was 64 plus Democrat seats in the House of Delegates, which is going to force through a referendum to split the states 10-1 Democrat map. And I would not be surprised to see this administration in Virginia push for universal mail-in balloting to make sure that those gains stay forever.
That's scary. I mean,
It's a good time to move to Idaho, Sean.
No. Unfortunately, I'm tied to it, but it does scare me what they're going to do with now that there's no Republican check, and they're gonna push to redistrict too.
10-1 map. It's going to be so extreme that I think that the Republicans might wind up lucking themselves into a good court decision. It's a really, I mean, Harris only won Virginia by 5.8%. And they're going to come up with a 10-1 Democrat map. The Republicans get more than 40% of the vote in New England and are 0 for 21 on House representation.
Yeah, it's funny how Massachusetts 8-0. I mean, you're right. I think we could pick up that Maine 2 seat, as you were referencing. That would give us 1 seat in all of New England, by the way, which is hysterical. Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, not 1. But in Virginia, I am very concerned that they are going to push through this. And it's going to take a legal interpretation of the General Assembly has to allow this bill to sit over a session. The question, or there has to be an intervening election. The Republicans are going to argue that there wasn't an intervening election because the election had started and people had early voted. Therefore, when they announced the special session, it had already, like the voting, a lot of people, hundreds of thousands, in fact, people had already voted. Therefore, there hasn't actually been a real election in between the 2 sessions of the General Assembly. I think that if what you're referring to is what I'm thinking you're saying, it's going to take a real court case to do that.
Well, I think the future of our country, probably by the next census, is going to include, I bet there will be a decision handed down for the Supreme Court that every state is going to have an independent redistricting commission, because we're getting out of control. And this is even if the Republicans win with this, I don't know that it's the right design to just redraw maps in the middle of a decade so you win, because the other side will do it too. But no, I will say that they should have done it in Indiana to keep up with the Joneses. So it's a real issue. We don't have, there's not a lot of swing. You know, Trump had more than 240 Republicans in Congress when he was elected in 2016. 2017, he went into office with more than 240 Republicans. And now it's all the Republicans could do to win 220 seats in the last election.
Unbelievable. Seth Keshel, thank you for being with us and breaking it all down. You know, as it's interesting because despite all the pundits that are out there, you base so much of data and trends and things that we can actually see. It's not just punditry. And I appreciate everything you do on your newsletter. Obviously, everyone should be getting excited about this new book that you've got coming out to break it down. Congratulations on that. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.